Hey everybody, welcome back. Every now and again, I'll do a bit of a deep dive on my channel just to see the subjects that I've covered, and I want to kind of connect it to a lot of the questions that I get asked by new subscribers or people who just started watching my videos. And oftentimes it'll be subjects that I've covered before and I've talked about sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6 years in the past. So every now and again, I do like to touch on those subjects again as a bit of a refresher for the new people. But I know it gets boring for the people who've been here for a while. So something that I did notice going through my videos is there are some that I don't agree with anymore, or I've changed my view. I want to go over those subjects again, but with my new perspective, because I think that it's really important to go through them. One in particular, because I find that my views in that video, whereas they were valid at the time, they are actually kind of harmful in hindsight. And I think it's important that I give you my new perspective. So one of those videos was, I called it When the Sparks Die. I used to get very poetic when it came to my video titles, which isn't really conducive to search and visibility on YouTube. So it was more for my subscribers who got the reference, but it didn't really help in relation to people that were really looking for anything regarding that subject matter. But it doesn't really matter because my views have changed. So what that video was about was the period where I call it my gray period. It was the period where I wasn't goth anymore. I wasn't anything anymore. So as many of you may know, I have been a goth for many, many years. I've been a goth for like about 28 years now. And I was 14 getting involved in alternative, 15 when I got involved in goth music and essentially the subculture. And there was a period where I got into a very abusive relationship. Again, I'm going to say trigger warning just in case. I won't get into a lot of the gory details of the thing, but I will say that my identity was taken from me. And my view on that at the time was that I held myself partially responsible because I didn't shift all the blame onto my ex, because in my eyes, well, I got into the relationship in the first place and I stayed there. So clearly I'm also at fault. I don't believe that anymore, but I'll get into what happened. So the way that the relationship started was a bait and switch kind of situation where I was not shown the person, but their representative. And this was a straight up narcissist. A lot of people like to use that term nowadays, but he is textbook narcissist. And it started exactly the way you expected. All the love bombing in the beginning, sending you song lyrics, and really kind of embodying everything that I looked for in a partner, and all of the the attributes I would want, all the features that I would want in a person. I sound like I'm choosing a car. But what I mean is my outlook on life, my outlook on relationships, what I want in the future. Like I want a family, I want a home, I want to do the traditional thing. I just want to fire out some babies, be a mom. And I also wanted somebody that was also interested in the same music as myself, because I didn't exactly have the best of luck with normies, because the situation, at least with me, it didn't jibe very well, because they don't like the music. And the music is very part and parcel with who I am. And if you don't like the music and I'm playing it and you're going to tell me to turn it off, we're going to have a problem. So I tend to look for people who are also involved in the goth subculture. So he presented himself as being such. He was not. He was being a big faker. And he faked on quite a lot of things. And once he got me and I was in the relationship, it was like total bait and switch situation. So all of the things that I was promised in the relationship suddenly became, instead of, and these are, I'm going to quote here, initially it was, oh, of course, I want the home, I want the family, I want that life. But in our own fun and quirky way, it turned into, if you're going to be with me, you better deal with the fact that you're going to die childless and alone. That is a direct quote. So This was just before we essentially split. But something that also happened almost immediately is his identity changed. Suddenly he didn't like goth music anymore. Suddenly he was into all these different things. And he went through a series of different identities, which was kind of startling. But by that point, I had lost so much of myself. And reason being is I was gaslit in a lot of ways. And what I mean by gaslit, because I know I'm using a lot of buzzwords here, but they are pertinent. So what I mean by I was gaslit is that I was told one thing or shown one thing, and I clocked it, and I kind of filed it away and kept it. And then I was told, no, you were not told that very thing. You're wrong. You're crazy. There's something wrong with you. So in situations when you're gaslit, you are made to feel like you're insane. You're made to feel like there's something wrong with you. You're made to question your sanity. You're made to question your intelligence. You're made to question your recollection of events, your ability to function as a normal human. And all of those things had happened because there were systematic things that were put into place. And it was very methodical to basically break me down. So it started with getting me into the relationship, the whole bait and switch. But the bait happened, and then the switch was slow. And then along with the switch became systematically breaking me down and shaming me and criticizing me for every little thing that I liked, everything I believed in, and everything that I loved, to where I felt ashamed for those very things. I was made to feel silly for being a goth for as long as I had. How can you listen to the same music for so many years? How can you dress the same as you did for so many years? How can you be involved in the same thing? As if that's a bad thing. It's a bad thing to hold on to the things that you've always loved, where it's presented to you as you're childish, you're unwilling to change, you are stuck in a certain period of time, and you are incapable of evolution, when in actuality, I was just being true to myself. These are the things that I loved. It was something that was important to me, and that was where I stayed. That's where I stuck. And instead, I was made to feel like those things were wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being true to yourself. There's nothing wrong with listening to the music that you love. And it's not like I was listening to the same songs over and over again. I was listening to just the same sort of genre of music. It's not like I didn't listen to other genres as well, but my tried and true goth music, that's what I listened to. But I was made to feel like that was wrong. So I was shamed into liking the music that I did. And it got to the point where there was a sort of like kind of a training in process. When say a dog licks himself in an area he shouldn't because he has a wound in that area, you put a cone on them, or you make a sound that they don't like, so they associate licking with that sound, and then they don't do it anymore. So kind of one of those situations. I use that because I have a dog who has allergies, and he licks his paws and he makes them all inflamed. He's on medication, but that's another story altogether. But I digress. It got to the point where whenever I was listening to my music or dressing the way that I wanted, let's say I had I had a band on that I particularly like. I'd be listening to it, and he would sing loudly over it in a mocking tone, mocking the vocalist, to make it sound like I was listening to something silly, and made me feel silly. If I were dressed in the way that I wanted to dress, wearing my clothes, I would get criticized for it. You look stupid in that. And it even got to the point where he would throw my clothes out. I had lost so much of my autonomy to the point where I was being timed in the bathroom. And I would often escape to the bathroom. Ever since I was a little kid, the bathroom had always been my escape route, and I would just spend time in there. And because I wasn't allowed to put the heat on, and I'm always cold, I'm always freezing, and he saw that I was always freezing, and he would pile on the clothes but turn the heat off in the winter because for whatever reason, he felt I didn't deserve to be warm, and I would be freezing all the time. I have hypothyroidism, so I'm naturally colder than most people. If you have hypothyroidism, you know that cold gets in your bones. So I would go in the bathroom with a magazine, and I would bring a magazine with me because I used to read a lot of health magazines that I would get from work. And I would fill the sink up with hot water, and I'd stick my feet in the bathroom sink, and I'd sit on the counter and I'd read my magazine. And it was my way to warm myself up and also to kind of get away from him, because every time I was around him, he was just making me feel bad about myself. And he would be knocking on the door. What are you doing in there? You know, you've been there for 12 minutes. You need to get out of there. Nobody spends 12 minutes in the bathroom. Get out. So to me, that felt very normal, but it was control, like, to the maximum degree. But the amount of control that he tried to exert over me was intense. I think about it now and I get both anxious and furious simultaneously. So given that I was shamed so much for who I was, for the music that I listened to, for being a part of the subculture, it had been ingrained so deeply within my brain that it was wrong and that I was silly, and also my need for peace. I just wanted peace. And he was relentless. Literally will follow you around from room to room until you took the shirt off that he did not like you wearing. And why are you wearing that? Why are you wearing that? Stop walking away from me. Why are you wearing that? You need to take, but relentless. When you are pestered and haunted to that degree, you will do whatever it takes just to make it stop, just so you can have that peace. So when that happened for so long, I eventually begun to believe those things about myself. I believed that I was childish. I believed that I didn't remember events properly. I believed that I was unattractive. I believed so many different things about myself that he had pretty much beaten into my skull, metaphorically. And I stopped being goth. There was a period where I just was not goth anymore. I was not listening to any music at all. And all I wore was the color gray. And I call that my gray period, because every time you saw me during that period, I was only wearing the color gray, and there was nothing to my personality. I couldn't tell you what my favorite show was. I couldn't tell you what my favorite color was. I couldn't tell you what my favorite food was. Food especially. Whenever he saw me eating, he took that as an opportunity to come sit by me and complain about something that I had done wrong. And he'd done it so often that I remember my friends actually kind of going off on him for it. It's like, why do you do that to her every time she eats? Which is probably why I was also so underweight at the time. But I digress once again. I was not goth. So I had basically the goth trained out of me by way of an abusive relationship. So what has changed from when I made that video previously, a few years ago, to now? So I want to say that I made that video around maybe 2016, perhaps 2017. But 2 years ago, I started trauma therapy, and I'm seeing a trauma therapist regularly. It initially started with twice a week, and then it started to once a week. And the reason that I see a trauma therapist is I do need to see a specialist because I have been diagnosed with CPTSD. And it was a diagnosis I did not want. It is a diagnosis I was not ready to accept, but after being diagnosed like a bazillion times by different specialists, I finally accepted it. And it was the best thing that I did, because seeing the specialist who is trained to deal with people who do struggle with that is by far the best therapy I've ever had. The first time I've ever gotten anything out of therapy. And as we know with the old narkies, they love to know that they can live in your brain rent-free, and they love to know that they've affected you. So I think that it's important, given that information, that I point out that my ex is not responsible for my CPTSD. What is responsible is my home life, my upbringing, my parents, etc., etc. It was a shit show, and he is not responsible. However, he didn't help, and he was a contributing factor. So what has changed since I made that video up until 2 years into trauma therapy? So one of my first crowning achievements is completely changing my perception of that entire situation, because in that situation, and this is why I think it's really important that I impart this to all of you, because I think that I had a very dangerous mindset. Because when you have trauma, because you've suffered something, we tend to blame ourselves. If not percentage-wise, wholly, we will fully blame ourselves. and this is a mistake, and this is what keeps us in a stuck position, or what we call stuck points. So my challenging belief that kept me at a stuck point was believing that I was basically in part responsible for what I had gone through, and I wasn't seeing the big picture. If you are a victim of a crime, a lot of people who have been a victim in certain ways to where it was traumatic for them will blame themselves in certain ways to say, I shouldn't have gone out that night, or I shouldn't have worn what I've worn, or I shouldn't have brought my credit card with me. Why did I do that? So whereas you're thinking those things, you're placing part of the blame on yourself when it's not. You're the victim. Just because someone chose to victimize you, that doesn't make you somehow responsible. Somebody did something to you. That's on them, not you. You were the victim in that situation. So did I get involved in the relationship? I did. However, if my ex had told me from the very beginning, what I plan to do is lie to your face, cheat on you, gaslight you, make you hate every aspect of yourself, torment you, throw out your stuff, vandalize everything else, alienate you from your friends and family, take you to a foreign country just so I can cheat on you and bang teenagers. If he had said that from the beginning, I can categorically state I would not have gotten into a relationship with this person at all. But what he presented to me was a false idea that I fell for. Therefore, me getting into a relationship with him was not my fault because I was lied to. So if you found yourself in a situation where you were in an abusive relationship and you're blaming yourself, but I should have seen through it, I shouldn't have gone along with it, I shouldn't have gotten involved, how is that your fault? You were lied to. Somebody lied to you, somebody tricked you. It's not your fault. If they were upfront and said they were going to do those things, then I'd say you may be partially responsible there, but not if you were lied to like that. And in most cases, 99.9% of the time, they're not presenting their true self. And that's how they get us. So as far as me staying in the relationship, well, I'm partially responsible because I stayed in the relationship. No. And here's why. Because when you're lied to like that, you're fed this false idea and you are involved in a relationship that this person is not. So you're giving yourself to this person wholly. And little by little, they're chipping away to where you don't realize it right away. They're chipping away at your self-esteem. They're chipping away at your identity. They're chipping away at these little things, and you're taking it as, wow, this person I really care about, they're noticing these things about me that I didn't realize were there. Because it's presented and done in a very manipulative fashion to where you are made to feel very vulnerable. You're vulnerable because you care about this person, and you're vulnerable because this person that you care about are noticing these negative things about you. And the problem is they're not true. They're not actually bad things about you. They're not negative things about you. They're ways that they're breaking you down to make you doubt yourself. Because from start to finish, they've gotten you to a point where they have you basically believing that they're almost doing you a favor by being in a relationship with you, because nobody else would ever be in a relationship with you, right? Not the way you are. Like, look at all of the things you believe about yourself now. And that's why you stay in that situation. So whereas I blame myself for staying in that situation, I see things. Believe me, hindsight is 20/20. And now I remember everything. I remember from the first moment I was being broken down, but when you're in it, you don't see it. So that's another thing that I think is also very dangerous, and it was a dangerous thing for me to impart to you, is to say that I stayed in the situation, so I'm partially to blame. I was broken down and I was stuck in a situation because I had no sense of self-worth, because I was stripped of everything, and I felt like, who's going to want me? I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be alone in the world. And that's not true. If you found yourself in that situation, maybe you're in that situation now, or you're outside of that situation and looking back, and you kind of view the situation in the same way where you see yourself being at least partially at fault for that, or partially to blame, you got to stop, because blame is what keeps us in that stuck point. It keeps us in that loop where we can't heal from it. what that does is it hinders you and holds you back from healing. And you really need to give yourself that grace to know that you were victimized in that situation. If you were not lied to, if you were not manipulated, then you would never have done that thing when you had your faculties, so to speak, in the very beginning, before the shit hit the fan. So don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. Another thing, looking back on, that I did was I did my 10 ungoth confessions. And this was more of a trend at the time, and this is really early when I started YouTube, and it had to have been like right in the very beginning, like 2016, I want to say. And the reason that I did it is because I really wanted to get involved in the YouTube goth community. And a lot of what was going on is trending kind of videos, and one of those things were the 10 ungoth confessions, and everybody got involved, and every goth YouTuber would say what their ungoth confessions were. And I think that that is kind of a silly concept in hindsight, because it kind of implies that we are not individuals. It kind of implies that we're a hive mind, that we don't have our own opinions and thoughts and ideas and hobbies and likes and dislikes, that we all must like the same thing. And that whole concept of ungoth confessions is really based upon the outsider perspective, what they think goths are. They think we drink blood. They think we're into kink. They think that we live our lives in a perpetual Addams Family cosplay. There are so many stereotypes that they believe, and it was framed in almost a shameful way, like, oh, I feel so ashamed that I like these ungoth things. And that's silly, because as we all know, goth is a music-based subculture, and you either listen to the music or you don't listen to the music. You know, maybe a few of my ungoth confessions, if I'm remembering correctly, is that I like reality TV. I do. I like trash TV. It's fun for me. It's a nice kind of departure from reality, like real reality, for a while. You know, mortgages and car payments and all adulting crap. Sometimes you just want to see a bunch of housewives go at it, you know? Not in that way. But the whole concept of ungoth confessions, I think, is also important to impart to a lot of baby bats, a lot of people that are new to the subculture, because it leads them to believe that there are certain aspects of their own personality or things that they enjoy. It makes them feel as if, oh, no, I can't be part of the subculture, or I am a poser, or nobody's going to accept me, or no one's going to like me because I like these things that aren't inherently goth. But really the only thing that's inherently goth is the music and the fashion. Something that I've said, and I know a lot of people hold the same belief of, is that we don't hold the patent on dark themes. So gothic clothing it's open to interpretation with regards to the public. If they, normie people want to wear goth clothes, by all means. It's the fashion is awesome. We love it, and we understand why you would want to wear it. And it's not like something that goths are really going to police, but something that we do tend to kind of side-eye is when the very people that are wanting to don the style now are the ones that made fun of us for wearing it and kind of tormented us and made our lives hell for doing so. That's kind of dickish. Other than that, fashion is subjective, whatever. But on the other side of the coin, you also have people who are involved in the subculture, or they listen to the music, but they don't really dress goth all of the time. And that's something that's important to also make note of, because it doesn't mean that you're not part of the subculture. It takes time. Not a lot of people have that kind of time or energy or inclination. Sometimes people are allergic to makeup. Sometimes it takes them forever to put on, and they have other crap that they need to do in life. Sometimes they just, they'll dress up 50-50. And that in itself doesn't necessarily mean that you are any less of a goth. So just because a person does something that might not be the stereotypical cookie cutter sort of goth thing, like for example, they like to wear unicorn pajamas, or they love cheesy anime, or they like to crochet pastel grandma blankets because it's calming to them, and they like pastel because it makes them think of Easter eggs from when they were a kid, and it's nostalgic. Looking at it in hindsight, that whole concept is basically based upon a stereotype from normies looking at goths. It's important that when you look at them, you take them with a grain of salt, because they're really the only ungoth confession that could ever possibly exist is you don't listen to goth music, or you hate goth music. Other than that, Be a unicorn. Bake pink cupcakes. Knit pastel underwear. So going back into my previous videos, I felt like this was another important message that I impart, because looking at it then versus now, I think that my change in view is really important, because previously that really be seen as a little bit confusing for a lot of people. So it's really important that you understand that there really is only one true ungoth confession, and that ungoth confession would be that you don't listen to or like the music. Other than that, be a unicorn, bake pink cupcakes, knit pastel grandma panties. It does not matter. Whatever you want to do in life, jump up and down in puddles wearing nothing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's honestly, that's the only thing. And I just really take those videos with a grain of salt, because they're all still out there, the ungoth confession videos. Another thing that I think I used to be very aggressive about is I was very anti-haul and unboxing. And initially, when I first started my channel, I thought that that was sort of a rite of passage. It was something that you had to do because that's what I was seeing here. So I thought, okay, that's what you need to do to get your channel started. You need to do hauls and unboxings to kind of grow your channel, and then almost like a way to involve yourself in the community. It was all just kind of commercializing the subculture, making everything look like it was something that you had to buy. Like goth was something that was up for sale and you can buy your way into. It's like, oh, you know, I just purchased goth, I'm a goth now. And that's the way I looked at it. And seeing as the music and the subculture is something very important to me, it pissed me off and I would get really aggro about it. But now, you know, kind of looking back, I understand that it has its place. Whereas, yeah, the previous, where, you know, you had the people that were not involved in the subculture, but calling themselves goths and just unboxing a lot of things just for the sake of, you know, getting free stuff, that pissed me off. It still pisses me off. It's still annoying. However, it has its place in a lot of ways, because there are some that I've seen that were informative enough to show me whether or not I wanted to invest in a product. You know, okay, I don't like the look of that fabric, you know, because sometimes things photograph well, but then when somebody's pulling it out of a box and they're holding it up, you're like, well, that looks way cheaper than it did on the website. So it's helpful in that regard. And it helps you kind of spend your money properly. So whereas I still kind of believe that goth shouldn't really be something that you buy, I also think that I'm a lot more relaxed on that, because I think there is also a helpful factor to it all. And I don't see nearly half as much as those unboxing videos anymore, because the content with regards to the community has changed greatly, and it's a lot more almost a little bit more serious, but then there's also fun aspects to it. But it's not so commercialized anymore to where it's like constantly like, buy this and you'll be goth. And it's funny that it's only been 6 years, because it feels a lot longer to me since I've got involved. But I know that there are other things and other aspects that I have changed my view on. I only watched a few of the videos, but I really want to go back a little bit further and see like what else I changed my view on. But I thought that the ones that I touched on were really important, because I didn't want to impart any kind of information or ideas or wisdom that may be damaging to other people and cause further hurt or cause upset or cause people to feel unincluded or uninvolved, or even keep them stuck in a trauma loop where I was. So I think it's really important that I kind of give that update and tell you that trauma therapy, it made me do a complete 180, and I am a lot better now when it comes to a lot of things. Other stuff, it's you know, it's kind of like sucking the poison out. Once it comes to the surface, it burns. So there's definitely some stuff that I'm still working through, but I'm a work in progress. So hope you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, bye.